what it builds internally is what is felt externally. And so when you go to our website and you see that there's Shawn's face, there's like the actual Trainual people, employees in our ads. It might have been one that literally I just shot on my phone walking down the street, or was sitting in an Uber with Chris and just shot. Like, we are still at this stage of the business doing things like we did when we were just starting a month in, and like, let's just film this video because it feels authentic. And so I think that that's just always been part of who we are, is authenticity externally and internally.
This episode of Inside the Process is powered by Trainual, the one app that organizes who does what and how. Check it out at trainual.com.
Today is not about us, it's about you. So this is going to be jam-packed. Yeah. Tons of dad jokes coming.
We are right now laying the groundwork for who is going to be leading tomorrow.
This song is such a jam.
Ideas don't build multi-million-dollar businesses. It's the implementation and execution of those ideas that do.
Self-made can lead to self-destruction. You are successful at what you give attention to.
This is why I was created. This is why I was made. I was made to do this.
It's about how to build your playbook.
That was such an incredible session.
Well, what is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Inside the Process, the real-time podcast where we're serving you with practical, actionable frameworks, guidance, tips, tricks, hacks to help you operationalize, nurture, and scale your business, and hopefully, I think, become better leaders and all-around human beings.
Yeah, and the way we do that is we are bringing on the brightest and most wonderful minds, the thought leaders who have done this, who are doing these things, to share their processes, share what they're doing super well, share the best practices so that we can all get better here together. So we're really excited to do that. We're really excited that you all get to be part of this process as well. Again, you can see the mics are unmuted, so you are able to talk if you have any questions. Feel free to raise your hand when you do have a question you want to ask. We'd love to call on you. You can unmute your line, and that way you can ask the question. You can also pop your questions in the chat as well, or there's also the Q&A. Whatever tickles your fancy, go ahead and do that. We'll go ahead and answer those questions as we go through the session. All right?
All right. So I'm Mallory, one of your co-hosts today, a 10-year systems and ops veteran turned marketer, and I am here with Shawn, the super awesome training and dev guy.
And we are your operations and training super duo and your host for Inside the Process. So welcome again. We're super excited to be here today. And I'm going to let Mallory kind of give you an overview of what we're talking about.
Yeah. So our thought process behind picking today's topic really was inspired by the fact that I was once a community member turned Trainual team member. And I just think that journey is so interesting and so surreal sometimes to even think about. And whether I was a customer or now being on the Trainual team, one thing that stands out to me is that I was always drawn in and made to feel so connected to Trainual's mission and values and the Trainual story. And I know that that wasn't by accident. And so I'm really excited to be bringing in our guest today, who was one of the two people behind the early inspirations for Trainual's mission and values, and having him here to teach you how to create that connection in your company as well with your own story, mission, and values.
Yeah, so today we are super, super stoked to welcome Jonathan Ronzio, our Chief Marketing Officer here at Trainual. He is an adventurer, he's an artist, he's a musician, he's a motivator, and he's also an all-around really nice guy, right? So glad to have you here with us, Jonathan. Love to have you just kind of kick it off and tell us a little bit more about your journey and, you know, how you got here. I know that the story of Trainual is more than just two brothers who started a business. I know you had some other things you were doing, so I'd love to hear your story a little bit as we get into this today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you both. You've been doing such an awesome job with this series, and I'm so happy to be a part of it. This is going to be a lot of fun. So yeah, it is more than just two brothers starting a business. It But in essence, it also is just that. And it always has been that our whole lives, right? And so like Chris is 3.5 years older than me. Growing up, it was the lemonade stands, the car wash companies, the landscaping things. Like there was just always something that we were doing together. Typically it was like Chris figuring out how to meet the celebrities at whatever golf course by like stationing the lemonade stand there, and then getting like his like little cute kid brother to do whatever needed to be done at the stand, right? And so I affectionately think about my journey towards learning delegation in essence of Trainual, right? Is that Chris was always the master delegator, and I just was always the one that everything got delegated to. So I grew up not necessarily being a pro at delegation. I grew up being a pro at just taking everything on. And that became like my identity of this, just I could do whatever and figure it out. And that's thank you for the nice intro, but that is probably why my life is just like I do this and this and this and this. And I've not been able to like pick one life path because I have so many, interests. But yeah, I'll try to keep this brief. The story through the years is that in high school, Chris was working at a supermarket, met a kid who was deeply involved in the cable access studio, started going there, checking out the cameras, ended up pitching the high school on being able to film like the state cheerleading event that was at our high school. And then just think like, oh, can sell these videos to the competitors and to the coaches and whatever. And so at that point, I wasn't even in high school. He was 14. I was 11. He'd come back from that event, and I learned how to edit in the basement and learned how to like take all the events that we were doing and like basically duplicate all the VHS tapes in these different towers and then package them up and go to the post office. And it just became this journey through a decade of doing these amateur live sporting events together. That was cheerleading. It was dance. It was figure skating, synchronized swimming, all of these things that we grew the company nationwide, had 3 offices. And that was our journey together for, a little over 10 years through high school and college. And at the core of that was figuring out how to systemize how we showed up at every single event, because I couldn't be at 3 events happening in the same weekend in different states, nor could he. And so we had to figure out how does, it's called EVC, Event Video Company, how does an EVC event look and feel the same in every location, no matter who is there, no matter who's the production manager, who's the video operator, who is the sales table representative. And so we standardized everything and had really everything dialed in to like the color of the lanyard and the North Face sweater that we would give everybody that worked an event, to the banners that would go at every table, to the type of cameras that they shot in and the frame rate that they shot in. And all of that was just systemized, right? Fast forward to like 2012, these got pretty popular. And all of a sudden we saw the writing on the wall of people starting to film more in the stands than buy the videos. And so exited that business. And that was when Chris had already moved to Arizona. I moved to Colorado, and we, for the next 6 years or so, went kind of on just different paths, where he had taken all of that knowledge of just operational efficiency and kind of how, like, the philosophy of how we build that part of the business, and started applying that to helping other small businesses figure out how to build more efficient operations and build more repeatable, scalable systems. And that was what he was doing through his consulting firm, Organized Chaos. And me, I took all of everything that I learned as far as like marketing and branding and video production and media, and pursued basically 6 years of just adventure media and documentary filmmaking and working with brands to tell social media stories, and just getting so deep into social storytelling and branded content. And I had an agency that was doing that at the time, and it was fun. I was just getting paid to like travel the world and climb and make social media content for cool brands that I liked. But then late 2017, Chris had already had a beta product called Trainual that existed inside of his consulting company, that he was already helping businesses with their onboarding. And it was just like, that was one of the things that Organized Chaos, his consulting firm, did, was build custom apps to solve certain problems, to create more efficient businesses. And so Trainual was something that was already built. And I was about to go to Alaska for a month to climb Denali and just be entirely off the grid. And I had clients that still needed their deliverables, right? The podcasts had to go out, the newsletters had to go out, the content had to be published on the website, the things that had to still be done. but I was kind of more of a solopreneur with like a few contract writers at the time. And so the first time I ever used Trainual was to just like document how to do these things that I was doing in my company, Explore Inspired, and offload them to a couple writers and to my wife for the month that I was just on a glacier. And so I got back from that trip kind of burnt out at that time on the adventure side of, what I was doing. And Chris was a little burnt out on scaling his, trading his time for consulting revenue. And both of us kind of like talked about it. And he was thinking already, maybe this SaaS product is something, maybe there is some scalability here. And so end of 2017, I took a pause on what I was doing with my agency and went out to Arizona and spent a few months just getting Trainual off the ground, not necessarily thinking that I would be involved long term, but it just became so fun to be working together again because we hadn't in 5 or 6 years. And there was just this like energy and this magic to collaborating again that was just amazing. And so, here we are nearly 6 years later with just an incredible team, an incredible customer base. And it's been just the most fun to build this and lean into both of our separate skills of him being that more like operationally efficient minded management kind of person, and me spearheading a lot of the random creative, brand stuff that we've done to grow this thing and build the funnels.
Oh, it's fun to see at least 6 years of that. Almost 6 years of that with you. So
it's been cool. Yeah. So I guess that's in a nutshell. I tried to make that, the story of my life as quick as possible.
I actually would love to like segue us into what we want to talk about today, which is not only company story, but creating those missions and values and creating those connection points that people feel drawn to. And I think about being at my last 2 organizations where they used sort of rinse and repeat, maybe canned motivational messaging that sounded rigid, it sounded scripted, it sounded, very corporate. And no one really bought into it. And if they did, I don't think anyone really held it close to their heart and how they worked or interacted with others on the team. But from Trainual customer to Trainual team member, I've always believed in the Trainual story and the Trainual mission. And I've always felt connected to it, like I shared earlier. And so I'm curious, Jonathan, how do founders, entrepreneurs, maybe leaders who are charged with this task, how do they strike a balance between these lofty, inspirational core values that maybe sound good and those that are authentic and genuine that people can truly relate to?
Well, can I flip the table to both of you? Either of you can take this, but before I dig into that, I'm just curious, Mallory, as somebody who was an advocate on the sidelines, who then was drawn into that story and is now internally here, living it and breathing it. Like, I'm curious, if you want to go into just what drew you to it, what felt different, like specifically, or Shawn, feel free to take it as well as like employee number 9. There was obviously, in the early days of us still not having everything figured out, there was obviously something that spoke to you that allowed you to take a flyer on this little startup, right?
I mean, this is going to sound so cliche and maybe some people are going to roll their eyes, but I mean, I just felt the culture and the people and just the genuineness of the people on the team and that they were exceptional hires. And I remember saying to myself on a couple of occasions before I think I ever really thought it was a possibility or something that I was actually going to try to do, I would say to myself, man, what kind of person do I have to be on a team like Trainual or to get hired at Trainual? What kind of accomplishments do I have to have? What kind of ways do I need to encourage others or build others up? Like, what are these things that I have to do to be worthy of being on a team like Trainual? And I think that's really powerful because it was probably a year or more before I actually said, okay, I think I'm gonna put my my name in the hat and see what happens, and ended up here, which is why I say it's so surreal.
Yeah, for me it was I had a conversation very early on with Chris, and it was kind of like I was leaving an organization that had suddenly become very, very big and corporate overnight, and it was not my jam anymore. And I got connected with Chris, and very early in that conversation, he was talking about core values. And when he was talking about those values, I really sensed from that conversation that he was like legit about those. Like these were meaningful to him. And it wasn't just, again, I've said this before, but like writing on a wall, right? It's not just up on the wall, like, oh, that's nice. It's like, no, these are part of who the individual is. And I wanted to be part of that organization just as quickly as possible.
So I think that if I were to boil it down to, Mallory, what you were asking, like how to bring to life something that does draw people in, that feels authentic, versus when you see something like integrity, excellence, sustainability, right? It's like, and those are okay if it's authentic to you, right? If like sustainability is part of your core value, maybe that works because you spent 2 years of your life working on like a permaculture farm in Costa Rica, and you're super passionate about bringing sustainability to every element of your manufacturing touch point. And, it's like, if it is authentic to you, amazing. But buzzwords just don't work. They're cliche. And I think that people these days specifically, the BS meters are so high and so fast because it's heightened because of social media. And I truly think that people can smell out inauthenticity faster than like a fart in an elevator. And it's just, you have to be true to what you are. And so for us, I think, Shawn, you said that the company we're at was getting too big and corporate. I feel like it's very much like growing up. And I think it's an interesting balance between like Trainual, our philosophy and our product is meant to help businesses grow up in a lot of ways, not just grow, but grow up in terms of like how seriously you take your systems and your operations and all that. But at the same time, I have always been somebody, and I know Chris is as well, that like never wanted to grow up, right? We're still kids at heart. And it's like somewhere along the line, a lot of people get self-conscious about dancing in public. And I think that we have just had as a kid, you don't care. You'll be the first one on the dance floor at the wedding, just like shaking it to whatever is on. And then as a adult, you get more self-conscious and more reserved, and your inhibitions they're a lot higher before you're able to like break that boundary. And I think that we have just always fostered a culture of fun in a way that allows you to still embrace childlike wonderment. And that's something that I think that too many corporations or growing small businesses think that they have to grow up their operation. And that at the same time means like we have to grow up and get more serious. And I don't think that they have to go hand in hand. And that's probably what has been so at the core of Trainual's core values, is that like we don't want to grow up. We value, crazy fun experiences. We value taking risks. We value the startup mindset and methodology and the experimentation. And so that's what I think like probably you see on the outside, even on from what we say on the inside, right? Core values, your mission, your vision. These are things that you're telling your employees when they come to work for you, that you're unveiling during orientation or even in pre-onboarding, right? To make sure that they're aligned before they start. And these are things that you might say in every single quarterly all hands or internal monthly kickoff is like, this is our mission. This is our vision. You're not necessarily saying that to the world all the time, but what it builds internally is what is felt externally. And so when you go to our website and you see that, oh, it's, there's Shawn's face, right? There's like the actual Trainual people, employees in our ads. You might have I think Mick had said he came to us from an Instagram ad. It might have been one that literally I just shot on my phone walking down the street, or was sitting in an Uber with Chris and just shot. Like we are still at this stage of the business doing things like we did when we were just starting a month in, and like, let's just film this video because it feels authentic. And so I think that that's just always been part of who we are, is authenticity externally and internally. And so the core values were built around making sure that this was a place that we wanted to work in, right? And we would have fun showing up to every single day and feel passionate about contributing to. And that allows you to find the other people who are going to feel that same way. And it becomes like this beacon, this like honeypot that is bringing the people who need to be there because they want to have that same level of fun. They want to, feel that same kind of energy and share that same purpose. And to bring it all the way back to like we can go through the specifics of the verbiage of a mission statement and they're kind of boring, right? When you actually like break down the verbiage of it. But at the same time, at the heart was always just, we want to create more time for people to do what they love. And that for an entrepreneur or a business leader, it could be investing back into the business, doing the things that they like doing in the business, not, the day-to-day grind that they have needed to do. Or it might be that they want to spend more time with their family or whatever else. There was always a human element at the core of building around this mission to create software that solves this problem. The next step of why is to empower and build more entrepreneurial leaders or intrapreneurial leaders to be able to do more of what they love.
Yeah. And I made a face too when you said integrity and trust and sustainability. So hopefully I didn't offend anyone that has those as core values. But I think about just how many people think of those core values. My last company included, like, those were like the standard core values, and it feels like everybody had them. But then seeing Trainual do it differently, where it's like no red tape, make ideas happen, carry the groceries. And some element of those have integrity and trust and sustainability and all of those catchwords built in, but they're more relatable. They mean something. They're created foundationally from who you are and who Chris is and who the team members are that joined you guys thereafter. So how would you help someone who has maybe some of these standard core values like integrity and trust and profitability and hard work and all those standard ones? How would you help them to dig deeper and turn those into things that are relatable and very unique to the company and the company brand?
Yeah, so you called out that we have like make ideas happen or carry the groceries, and I can tell stories about like what went into both of those, and I will. But what you said is like integrity or quickness to act or something like that might be inside of those things, right? Excellent customer service might be inside of carry the groceries, but it's rooted in a story that people can relate to. And so that's where it's like going back to the sustainability thing that I mentioned. Instead of saying like sustainability is a core value, your core value could, if you did have that experience of like volunteering in Central America, your core value could be something that is more like use the fish head, right? And it's like, oh, what does that mean? Well, it's like, oh, cool. In if you're catching fish out of a pond and then you're filleting and eating that fish, you are left with this carcass with this head that then you can bury in the soil and the plants that you're trying to grow. And now it's like helping to fertilize the peppers that you're growing. And like there is a story of sustainability inside of this thing that catches your attention and feels like it resonates in a different way. So it's just a matter of like, what is the thing that we want people to actually feel about this, and how do we root that in what's the next layer of the story we need to tell to get them there, right? Sustainability is the end goal. The bury the fish head is the opening statement. That's the hook. And that's how I think about core values, is carry the groceries is the hook, right?
Yeah, I absolutely love that. I think that's one of the things that really stuck out to me going through the core values at the beginning. The one that stood out to me in particular was carry the groceries. And I love what you said is the story behind it. And I think when we look at, the story of that one, very, very high, just high brow here, is that Chris used to work for a supermarket, as you mentioned, Jonathan, and one of the values there was, you help people out with their groceries. And it was just this thing where he'd go not just bag their groceries, but take it out to the car and help them put it in the car, and kind of going the extra mile, if you will, is another way to say carry the groceries. But how good that felt. That's something that Chris mentions in his little video, because we have a little video where Chris talks about each one of the core values. And he said, I just felt really good about that. And so in our business, we want to go the extra mile. We want to help each other out. We want to do things that make people smile. And there's a story and scenario around it. So maybe looking at those buzzwords, the integrity, the honesty, those things we talked about, but looking for those specific scenarios and telling the stories around those scenarios that really help us as employees to latch onto. That's something I resonated with quite a bit. I love that. I love serving people. I love helping people. And that was a core value that that it hit me and struck me. And I loved the story that went with it.
Yeah, absolutely. So my favorite core, I'm even wearing the shirt today in honor of doing the session. My favorite core value is make ideas happen, right? Like rocking it here.
That's one.
And that's like, that is rooted in, let me take you back to 1996. We get our first like desktop computer in our house. We're living in Naperville, Illinois at the time. And it is a Windows 95 compact computer. And on this computer, I recall our dad basically, or maybe Chris actually made the screensaver, but it was like the screensaver when it would be on, and it was just those scrolling letters, said, "Do it now and finish." And it was because our dad said those two things to us all the time. He drilled that in as like a mantra growing up, do it now and finish. And the point of it then was basically to like, when you get home, if you're told to do your homework then so you can play later, right? If like mom calls on the way home and says to like turn the oven on, the oven better be on when mom gets home. Otherwise it's, you're in trouble. And so it was like that basically initiating action and then following through was what he was trying to build inside of us. And so when we were thinking like, how do we extend this to our team? How do we get them rallied around the same kind of feeling of like act at the speed of ideas and follow through on like what needs to be done? And that just became make ideas happen. But now when we talk about make ideas happen, we're talking about this story rooted in, the screensaver that our dad had up, whatever that was, 30 years ago or something. And so that's, Chris's grocery store story, the computer story. It's like effective core values are authentic stories and not just picked from a list of words that like sound nice.
I'm going to share this real quick. Courtney just posted, she said, "I really love this discussion. We have those meh values that aren't actionable, and we have wanted to shift to this and get stuck every time we try to iterate. This is motivating us to take the next step to shift where we want to go and know that we'll really embody more of who we are as a company and culture. Motivated to dive into our stories as an exercise to make this happen." That's awesome.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
You made me think about something too. There were so many times in prior organizations, on prior teams, where they'd pass out like those little cards that, have all the core values, and everybody was supposed to put one like on their desk or, attach it to their monitor. And that was how they wanted you to feel connected to them, was just by seeing them every day. And a lot of times, if I didn't have that card, I couldn't even remember what the heck our core values were. Like they just weren't relatable, couldn't remember them, didn't feel connected to them. But at Trainual, the core values are everywhere. I even find myself saying a lot, make ideas happen, no red tape. Like Shawn will say, great job carrying the groceries, or like, Cindy will say that in a chat. And just people use that in their everyday language all the time. And so I'm curious if it's something that you had to intentionally sew into the fabric of Trainual, or if it was a specific strategy or just something that came with time, because it's not something that I have been exposed to before, where they're just so present in everyday conversation, in meetings and in praise and in things like that.
Yeah, I mean, to the level that they're baked into everything today was not a strategy from the beginning. It has evolved over time, for sure, of how like when somebody gives praise in the channel, it is tied to like calling out what is this praise associated with from a core value standpoint, right? And if you're praising somebody for going the extra mile and helping where they didn't need to, you would call out the carry the groceries thing. It's like associated with that praise. That level of detail of strategic integration was not foreseen early on, but we always really, really cared about these being so integral to who we hired. And so it was a matter of, like collect experiences, right? Like we hire people here that value trying new things, going new places, getting out of their comfort zone, setting goals, being relatable in a lot of different aspects, because that was something that early on having moved like 5 different times as kids, Chris and I had to figure out how to show up in a new place and learn and like fit in right away, right? And had to be kind of amorphous in different worlds. And then like even in the consulting world, you're a more effective consultant if you can show up at the beginning of the meeting and you can speak to the fact that that you were playing pickleball, or that you've tried this ice cream shop in Portland, or that you have also volunteered in Costa Rica, right? I keep going back to that. And the more that you can like draw from these different various stories of your life, the more that you can find relatability with new people, and the more effective you can build relationships and connections with new people. And so that is something at the core of who we look for when we're hiring, is like, is this person, do they have an inclination to help when needed, even if it's not in their job description? Because that's the kind of person that we need. Are we hiring a person who does not necessarily need permission to act on a good idea? They just are, that they are obsessed with like pursuing, progress. Are we hiring somebody who is okay with, bureaucratic red tape and like allows themselves to hide behind it? Or are we hiring somebody who sees that like you need to cut through it sometimes and figure out a better way, right? And so all of these things go into who we are actually bringing onto the team, and that has always remained true from the start. And then I think the biggest step strategically we took early on was aligning our like employee recognition, our like award at Trainual, to the core values. Instead of it just being like a random employee of the month or employee of the year kind of thing, it was always tied to how much this person represents who we are in terms of checking the box on the core values. They did something in their day-to-day or in their quarterly, work, that it was recognized by everybody else that they lived the core values. And so that was always something that, that we've had here since we introduced what is known as the Woolly, which if anybody watched The Office, they had the Dundee, which makes probably more sense because it was Dunder Mifflin and they had the Dundies. The Woolly, you probably hear that and you're like, what the heck is the Woolly? Why does Trainual have the Woolly Award? But the Woolly Award is our core value award, and we can get into why.
Yeah, you can definitely talk to us about that, because winning a Woolly feels a lot like winning a Grammy when you're at Trainual.
For real, exactly.
Well, the background to why it's the Woolly is at the January 22nd or whatever the actual launch day of Trainual was back in 2018. We had an event at a restaurant in Scottsdale, Arizona. And for that event, we had these poster boards printed that kind of just had some fun messaging about like what Trainual does, right? We had one message that was like a place for all the hats, right? And it just showed a coat rack, and it was all the different hats that you put on a coat rack. And that was representative of Trainual being a product where you can like start to take off your hats. One of the other posters was just 2 sheep side by side. And if we think back to the first cloned animal ever, it was Dolly, right? And so we had this joke from an early ad where like Chris and I were walking down the street after an event that we were at in San Diego, and I was talking about how when we were not working on Trainual together, when he was doing Organized Chaos and I was doing my agency, he used to have me take like personality quizzes and do those kind of like work methodology indexes, because he was trying to find people who worked like me. Like he knew how we worked together, and he was trying to clone me because I wasn't going to go work in the consulting business with them. And so we riffed on that message about like, if you can't clone yourself, how can you clone your best people? We got to document the way that they work, right? And so we were going off this clone yourself or clone your people message, and so I just threw these 2 sheep on this board, and it said clone yourself, and then for a little while we went deep into the sheep messaging. And like, so if you go to like the Trainual shop, there's still a t-shirt that has a sheep on it with the Trainual logo inside of it. And when it came time to launch the awards, we had just been affectionately calling that sheep Woolly, and it just became the Woolly Award to represent, something that was like a deep cut in the Trainual culture, because we like have since not done anything with the sheep logo other than that shirt. We've like we still do the clone yourself messaging, but like sheep has not been a prevalent part of our growth story other than this very weird moment in the beginning days. And it persists through this Woolly Award, which is like a cool piece of our culture.
Yeah, I love that. That's actually my first shirt that I have. My first Trainual. I've got like a whole closet of Trainual shirts these days, but my first shirt is the sheep shirt. It's a prized possession for sure. But I love that concept, and I love that the Woolly is directly, like you said, is directly tied to the specific core values. Yeah. When we offer praise in our praise channel, there is a specific place where we say this is the core value or the core values that this person personified, and all of that comes together to the winners of the Woolly. That's what we call them, the winners of the Woolly. And that's such a cool thing. It's such a great way to ingrain the core values. It's not just words on a wall. They are part of who we are and what we do every single day when we're at work. And I think it's an easy process to get started. Again, kind of looking for those stories that wrap around those core values and then ingraining them into your day-to-day work with your team members. I think it's a fantastic thing to do.
Yeah. I want to come back to something you said too, where you said it's woven into the hiring process. So it's not just part of the culture, and it's not just part of what you do and what you expect of the team, but it's all the way back to probably even your sourcing and like pre-hire checklists that you're doing. You're thinking about these core values. And I want to come back to a question that Dan asked. He said, what do you do with an otherwise great and valuable employee? So I'm thinking like a high performer on your team who does not and will never share your main company values. And I want to take that question a step further and say, would you hire someone who was on paper just incredible and you know they have like a track record for being amazing, but maybe they don't align with one of the core values? Like, how do you approach it if you have someone on your team and in the hiring process?
The real answer is it depends. But I'll share kind of like my opinion on that is it really depends on what kind of culture you care about building, right? And if culture really matters to you, and if you want to, be like Trainual has won Best Place to Work awards, every year in a row, and that's a real piece of pride for us. We care so much that this is a place that people want to show up and feel a part of and grow together. But not every business has to be that, right? Like I'm sure Twitter, or now X, is not going to win any Best Place to Work awards. And I bet that, when Elon's hiring whoever needs to be hired to try to like turn around what X's revenue, if they're turning away advertisers or advertisers are leaving them, like there are probably some real serious business issues that they just need some people who can produce, and culture is not necessarily what they're valuing building right now. So there are fringe cases scenarios where like, you need what you need. But if you really do care about the culture that you're building and like trying to build something more sustainable for both yourself and the people that are there, and you care about employee retention as well, you will stay true to it in the hiring process. And so we do not bring people onto the team that are in direct contrast with any of the values that we live by. Because again, our team would see that, and then that is a signal to them that we're not living it authentically, right? And so we have a low tolerance for it, and it's even we manage to it. Like when we have performance conversations with people, you cite the values, you cite how show up ready is a value, and so you could cite how somebody did not show up ready or persists to not show up ready to the meetings that they're on internally or externally. And so this is something we manage to and can manage out. And Dan asked, like, would otherwise great and valuable employee who will never share the main company values? I think that you could ask yourself a couple things there is like, do you wish everybody else was like that employee? Like, is that employee an all-star that you wish more of your employee base was like? Or are they an outlier that is kind of toxic to the rest of the culture and the employee archetype that you're building? And so, because you might be in a situation where maybe you didn't do an amazing job hiring to or defining those core values early on, and now you did, but are they the right ones? And like, is this person such a top performer and have the right attitude, and you need to shift the culture to be a little bit more like them? Is it that you need to rethink your values to more align with that employee and to bring the rest of the employee base there, and it's a messaging and a positioning kind of thing? Or truly they just aren't on board with what you're doing and how the rest of the team is building and what you live and breathe? And if that's the case, then personally, I would find another high performer, because it's sending the wrong signal to the rest of the team.
No. Yeah, that's a tough one to have to deal with, but I appreciate a couple of points that both Mallory, you and Jonathan both brought up, that the hiring process, that's where you can initiate that whole process. Is that when someone is coming in, when they're a candidate, the core values that you live and breathe are on full display, and they guide how that hiring conversation and process goes. And that way it's ingrained right at the very beginning. This is what we're looking for. And holding to those values, right? Holding to that. And if there is someone who is highly skilled, but you can see they are not aligning with those core values, at some point in time, that's going to come back to a head, right?
Think about your internal company culture as your immune system, right? Like how much do you every single day try to protect your immune system with the exercise you do, the foods that you eat, the supplements that you take, like you are all the time trying to protect your immune system because you do not want to be sick, right? But all it takes is that one like little cell of a virus or bacteria to get in to start to spread, and now you've got the flu or whatever else, and that can take you down, right? And so that's why it is that important to have at the front of the hiring process of like, who are we letting in? Is this a virus, or is this something that's going to jive with the rest of how my system operates in harmony and allow us to continue to grow together?
Yeah, no, it makes sense. So again, I appreciate that, Mallory, the hiring process, and then being ingrained within the whole everything that you do. So I love both those, and seeing how that has impacted me as an employee of Trainual. And for me, I want to live those core values, right? Because they're so prevalent all the time, and they have been ever since that very first conversation that I had with Chris.
So where to next? Oh, we got a hand raiser.
Yeah, there we go.
So I don't know how to turn my camera on. Maybe that's not an option. So I could give an example. Like, this is obviously a tough conversation, right? Because you have somebody inside of a company that appears to be an A player, but really isn't agreeing with the core values in the company. And I've had this happen this year, actually. I had to let a guy go, and after a lot of thought process, it came down to, if you're not with me, you're against me. And had I done something with it earlier than later, the outcome would have been less drastic to the company. So I hired this guy, and within 30 to 40 days, I knew that his values weren't aligning with mine. And I let him stay for over a year, and he ended up building a team inside my company. And so if I would have let him go earlier, I would have lost just him. But I waited, and it ended up, we lost 6 people who followed him out the door. And I recognized it immediately, and I didn't address it, and it ended up hurting worse than it would have had to. That makes sense. But I can tell just from being on here, what an amazing company Trainual is. When I was trying to build something, and I'm a salesperson, not really, an IT person. I was trying to build something. My first job, I worked at McDonald's, my first real job. I worked at McDonald's, and they set me down and had me watch VHS tapes on, this is how you build a quarter pounder, this is how you build a Big Mac, and went through all of them. And when I started my company, there's tons of real estate brokerages out there that fail to deliver the tools it takes to be successful. And I wanted to remove that. My goal is to help 5,000 agents across the country have a better quality of life through real estate by removing the roadblocks that most brokerages fail to do. And I realized early on that I had to become scalable. I had to use video. And I was trying to build something out that would really align well with getting the message across, that I could tell that they're actually doing the work so that they can get the reward. And just being on here for a few minutes, I'm so glad that I've connected with Trainual, because not only do I feel like we're on the same page and your company has exactly what I need to be to accomplish my mission, but also what great core values you guys have.
Amazing share. And like perfect way to end that as well, because that also accentuates like your core values are not just attracting the right employees, they are attracting the right customers, right? It's like it perpetuates out when you define the mission and the vision and those values. They're all intertwined. And as part of the mission, you're defining who do we serve? And the values are the like underlying beliefs and decision-making behaviors that drive you to achieve your mission of serving who you need to serve, right? So that was, thank you for the share on your background story, for your advice on how you should have probably cut the cord sooner on that employee, and for the kind words on Trainual. I really appreciate that.
Sure.
Yeah, we've gone through little evolutions over time as well. And that's, I think, the thing to give yourself the grace for as well. I know some of you may be listening here today going, okay, this is really cool. How do I get started? Like, how can I actually, maybe I go back in time just a little bit and just kind of go back to square one? I know, Courtney, you mentioned that a few moments ago with core values, but Jonathan, what would you say? I mean, how would you coach someone who feels like, hey, I don't know that I've got a really interesting story to tell, or I don't know how to get started with my core values? In that vein, how would you coach someone to kind of get started on that process if they haven't really formalized that at this point in time yet, or even if it's currently not working very well, because that's a possibility too.
So I would start again at the vision and the mission level, right? Like, you first want to figure out like what is it that we do, and like who are we serving and how are we doing it and why, and start to build out that recipe of a mission statement, and then start to think, yeah, and maybe it's evolving a current mission statement, right? But if you don't have one, that's where I would start. I think it has to ladder down from there, as well as thinking through like, what is the vision? Like, how we can't bring people onto the team with a motivating, with the right values, but nothing motivating them to like work together towards, right? And so what is the vision that we're building towards that's more aspirational, future forward from that mission? And then underneath that, then you start to have like, okay, we're happy with where we're going, where we're taking this. We understand today's mission operationally and who we're doing it for and why. And now let's think about, if it's an earlier, stage company, it's just kind of like a founding crew, you can all just have a brainstorm of like, what were the experiences in our lives that made us who we were, made us who we are, right? And just like casually spend some time thinking, sharing stories from childhood, from early work experiences that stand out, from mentors that you've learned from, and just start to source that information. And when you start to source that, you find these like defining moments in the timeline of your lives that you want to put a flag in, and that's where you can start to stem out the values from. And if you're later along, you can do that with, like who are our top people that we want to build up and build around? Because now at this stage, it's not just about us, it's about all of us. And so how do we build some values that are authentic to the model of the best people here that we want, everybody to be operating at that capacity and at that scale, right? And so that's kind of how I would think about it, is with the founding team, the executive team, the top performers, just start to source those like interesting human moments of how you became who you are and the way that you are and the way that you work. Why do you show up the way that you do? And when you can start to like think back to those stories, then that's where you can unpack the layers of that onion and think through like, collect experiences. You could see behind me, right? There's There's all like my favorite records. There's all books that, the second shelf are books that changed my life. There are all the like different medals of races and mountains and whatever challenges. And it's just like all of those things make up the perspective that I have to share with, with my team and how I can help coach them to be better personally and professionally. And so without those, we probably don't have a collect experiences, core value, right? And so that's what you need to figure out about your people to represent who you are.
Yeah, I love that.
Sorry, I'm just gonna say this real quick. I'm gonna just reiterate what you just said because I think this is such a powerful like nugget of wisdom. I popped this to the chat, but I'm gonna say it out loud because you just advised us to source your core values from the experiences of your best people. And what a powerful thing that can be, because you're right. The collective experiences of those people in the room that are one of the main reasons. I mean, on paper, they may look impressive, right? But it's the experience that they come with, the values that they bring with them, the way they work on a day-to-day basis. They're just mantra for work. That's where you source those core values and integrate those into, again, everything that you do in the business. So what a powerful thing that will be right there. I love that.
So I'm a huge Disney Pixar fan, and think about the movie Inside Out for anybody who's seen that, right? Like they have, it's not core values, but it's core memories. That is like the whole, root of that story, that the core memory gets knocked loose and they have to go find it because they don't think Riley can operate without it. But like what the core memories are attached to it's like Family Island and Hockey Island. And it's like those things that you see the moments inside of this child's life that created that core piece of who they are, of how they feel about family and friends, how she feels about hockey and camaraderie and competition. And so like, that's ultimately what you're trying to establish for your business. It's like, what are the life moments that are core to what created how you operate yourself and as a company, and then what becomes like the pillars of your business because of that.
Yeah, and I think just hearing you talk about, the medals behind you and the trips you and Chris have shared with us, the videos from Antarctica and like just all the cool experiences that you guys collect, and the channel we have of experiences at the highest level at Trainual. You guys demonstrate the core values every day. And I think that is just so foundationally important. If people take away nothing else, it's that you have to set the example in order to have people follow the example and to believe in them and to live into it. And so that's always been something that I admire, is that our senior leadership team lives into the core values, and I believe that they believe in them. But bringing us just kind of like full circle to a close here, we talked so much today about stories and just how foundationally important they are to all that we create. And speaking of channels, I see wins posted in our wins channel daily. We end our meetings with wins, and it's one of the immediate things that I admired about Trainual from the outside, then stepping to the inside, is just how passionate you guys are about customer wins. And so I would love to know if you have a favorite example of how an internal core value was evident in a memorable, speaking of the movie Inside Out, a memorable customer experience or big win that just like sits in your memory and is connected to the core values.
Oh, that's a deep one. I mean, there are so many all the time, and I feel like Shawn's favorite value is probably the one that comes to mind the most, to carry the groceries, because that's often what we see coming through in the wins channel as related to how we're supporting customers and somebody doing something beyond the scope of their job description. And I have to think back to like pre-pandemic. I think, locally in the like Scottsdale area, like I recall, I'm not going to say the business, but I recall a business struggling, but I think potentially getting to a point where they were thinking of canceling just because they were like figuring out how to cut costs. And I know that the customer success manager on that account went well above and beyond for like taking additional time, out of their day, beyond their work day, to like help make it possible for them to keep Trainual because their business operationally relied on it. And I know we even ended up bringing donuts to that business, just locally, showing up and trying to like raise spirits. And so like things like that. And that, that doesn't exist without the permission to go above and beyond and seeing the example of others doing it. So I guess that's one. I guess my mind always goes to donuts.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining us on Inside the Process today. Hopefully you guys learned a lot about how to craft your company's story, share those missions and values, but also if you don't have a hand in how you can develop those missions and values, hopefully you've taken away something on how you can connect to them, set the example for living into them with your teams or with your peers, and how you can just share your wins, those experiences, and that praise with one another. So would love to hear any wins related to your core values in the chat, or if you want to unmute and share them, feel free. But Jonathan, we just want to thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. This was tons of fun. I'm happy to continue the conversation on LinkedIn or wherever else. Trainual Insiders, definitely keep it going. But thank you all for joining today. And thank you, Mallory and Shawn. This was great.
Awesome. I'm going to share this real quick because it kind of brings us home here with, I love the storytelling aspect of everything we talked about. In fact, someone mentioned at the beginning of the session here, I love that we started with storytelling, and storytelling has been this entire session. So brands that are built around stories and stories of identity, who we are, where we've come from, are the most effective stories of all. This storytelling is a powerful way to bring brands to life. That was from Bill Dauphiné. So I love that, and I think it crowds exactly what we've been talking about here today. Again, same thing, Mallory. I want to thank you, Jonathan, for your time. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.